Hello and welcome to my presentation, The Hyperreal Image of the City and Contemporary Hotel Design. My name is Petra Perolini and I'm from Griffith University in Brisbane, Australia. My paper and presentation are discussing a second year design student project we coined the Pixel Hotel. The name derived from a project called Pixel Hotel, which was initiated in 2006 by a group of architects called IOTA for a concept they designed for their hometown of Linz in Austria. Linz was named the European Capital of Culture in 2009, and the project was for that event. I will only briefly describe the student project, but my paper will discuss it in more detail and show some student work. For this presentation, I will concentrate on the research and design process students had to focus on to understand historically how hotels, particularly chain hotels, emerged and how they are positioned in society. And particularly, we focused on the types of experiences they provide for guests. This slide shows the design brief of the semester project for second year interior architecture student at Griffith University. Students were asked to look at the Linz Pixel Hotel as a case study, as the approach undertaken by IOTA, the architects, was highly relevant to their semester brief, which was to reconceptualize experiences guests would get to experience parts of the city they would otherwise never see. Just like in Linz, students were asked to create experiences that allow the city to become the hotel, and the spaces are the rooms. The same selling point that Airbnb uses, the location of rooms and spaces away from the typical block of downtown hotels, encourages exploration and a more real experience. The mantra for Linz was also the mantra for our student hotel. This slide shows the 7 pixels IOTA created in 2009 for the city of Linz. My paper looks at hyperreality, and the definition. It refers to the domain of the real without origin or reality, and it refers to observations in design and in society at large that image has become the new reality. Images do not necessarily refer to anything, they become the new reality, and by doing so create huge consequences for social life. This presentation looks to firstly locate contemporary issues in hotel design and then identify the importance of the capacity for critical wins in designing hotel spaces. Students were asked to think about what are we changing and why, and what are we responding to. I'm now going back to the beginning of this student project and explain the process. Starting with the research phase, we looked at the historical overview of hotel design, mainly chain hotels, and positioned them socially. Students were introduced to different theories as they, of course, are powerful thinking tools for students. The theories aimed to demonstrate and provide guidance for students for their projects. We examined the theories of Baudrillard, De Boer, and Jemison, and we also looked at Jemison's critique of the Bonaventure Hotel in LA as a set of thinking tools for students to support this critical lens. Firstly, I'd like to talk about contemporary hotel design and the emergence of chain hotels. We can see this is the Stedler Hotel, the Hilton Hotel in Dallas, Texas, and it is understood to be one of the first big chain hotels and certainly the first big Hilton chain hotel. We can see from Conrad Hilton what this design is responding to. The time is not too distant when a traveler circling the globe will be able to stop at a Hilton hotel in almost any world city he may visit. These hotels express our ideal at any hotel anywhere should be more than just the center of the community. From an international aspect, the hotel can become the focal point of the exchange of knowledge between millions of people. Looking at the image of this hotel, we can perhaps agree that it stands way above ordinary life, but it represents and how it speaks to its surrounding city, and we can perhaps see how there was a desire to create this image around the world. It's interesting to look at the Stedler Hotel in terms of its rooms. It was the first to have a music elevator, central TV reception, function rooms, a large open ballroom, and modern conference and exhibition facilities, and staff of 100 people. At the same time as Conrad Hilton is conceiving of his chain hotels in Australia, the United States, and Europe, we were all experiencing what we now understand to be the post World War II emergence of the consumer society. This was not just about manufacturing goods, and in fact, was not about buying them, but as those images show, you're starting to buy an image of those goods. These goods now represent the way you have done well in the world. It was a time where society aspired to upward mobility. Following this, as the chain hotels proceeded in their development, we see various stages in the expansion of these chain hotels. The expansion of major hotels outside of the US and Europe and to other markets, for example, China. And this calls up very important issues about the relationship of the hotel and its surroundings. We saw in the rather confronting design of the Hilton Hotel in Texas, it bore no relationship to its surrounding except to dominate it. We can interrogate this further once we see that it's a whole set of cultural assumptions being dumped in another country. Of course, the emergence of the huge hotel groups was due to the gradual acquisition and mergers carrying on within the industry. Unsurprisingly, and by virtue of some of the things I've already mentioned in hotels, the chain hotels desire the same experience everywhere, that sometimes can be quite unfeeling as to the environment they're in. That is, that it's a one size fits all idea. As buildings, they have a strong articulated sense of exterior and interior space. Designs respond to reconciling public and private natures. Hotel space is expressive of consumption choices, appealing to taste and status. Designs reflect contemporary trends. Hotels are forms and dwellings that serve the circulatory city. Organizations serving both consumption and service functions, and they are reflective of the complex social geographies of city life and provide a microcosm of the occupational hierarchies. They are increasingly organized around globalized division of labor. The three works that have informed the basis of the theoretical inquiry for students were Baudrillard's work on simulations. He was also the one who coined the term hyperreality. Debord's work on society of the spectacle, which is closely related to Baudrillard's notion of hyperreality, and Frederick Jamieson's analysis of postmodernism through his eyes and critique of the Bonaventure Hotel in Los Angeles. So let's have a look at their diagnosis of the problem with consumer culture of the late capitalism. Baudrillard says abstraction today is no longer that of the map, the double, the mirror, or the concept. Simulation is no longer that of a territory, a referential being, or a substance. It is a generation of models of a real without origin, or reality, a hyperreal. The territory no longer precedes the map, nor survives it. Henceforth, it's the map that precedes the territory. The point here is a break from the idea of images that are knowingly and explicitly a representation of something to images that then leave the reference of that far behind and participate in a world of its own, and images that then determine the choices we make and what we consider to be normal. Add to Baudrillard's notion, we have got the Boer's notion of the spectacle. In societies where modern conditions of production prevail, all of life presents itself as an immense accumulation of spectacles. Everything that was directly lived has moved away into a representation. You can see similarities with the idea of the hyperreal. It's the emphasis on the image, which is now taken on a life of its own, independent of who's produced it and what it refers to. There are big consequences for the society of the spectacle because, and very importantly for designers, we experience the world and the world is able to be seen or pictured. So you could imagine a world without the rapid dissemination of images and then see it after that. What we have is a major change in what we consider to be normal. When we think of a hotel in China, we might as well think of a Hilton hotel. We can see it there, we can imagine it. We have a whole understanding of the world based on being able to see and work with images in our understanding of the world. In modern capitalist societies, the world is increasingly seen by means of various specialized mediations rather than grasped directly. That spectacle, rather than being a matter of mass dissemination of images, becomes an actual world view. Though now, when we think of the world, we think of it in terms of images that have already been given to us. Let's put the Boer and Baudrillard together because whether they use the term spectacle or simulacrum, they have in common a reading of the manifestation of political phenomena under contemporary conditions as itself and essentially spectral events. That is to say, they view political or historical life as being essentially separate from everyday experiences, which is increasingly the side of alienation in its original Marxist sense. Now, if we were to gather together the importance of these three theories and what it might mean for design and for our way of thinking, alienation sits underneath all of this because you'll see that each of them is really lamenting our alienation from a more everyday personal experience of the image we are subjected to and our capacity to have control over them and, in fact, to make our own mind develop our own values. My paper goes deeper into Marx's theory and gives examples of the so called commodity fetishism, things that have been totally dislodged from its origins and meanings and now come to constitute a world in their own right, a world of values, of aspirations. Chain hotels can perhaps be seen in that way. Late capitalism is now understood in terms of fetishism of design. Perhaps we might revisit Baudrillard and his notion of the hyperreal and realize that his theory is just a progression of what we have been talking about in fetishism. It's Baudrillard who begins to test fetishism as a sign of social values. The fetish object is taken to stand for their owner's social status and nothing else. Here, a fetish is no longer an unreal object believed to have properties it does not really have, but it means of mediating social value through material culture. These ideas of De Boer and Baudrillard are implicit in Jameson's reported experience of the Bonaventure Hotel in Los Angeles. You can see from the image that this hotel stands in just as brutal as fashion over the city as the Hilton did, with the sun reflecting off it. People who have tried to get into it say it is extremely hard to find the entry point to his hotel. They are not immediately apparent, and people have been unable to get in simply because they couldn't find an entry point. They are quite hidden. Jameson's commentary on the Bonaventure Hotel can be summarized in his quote: I believe that with the certain number of other characteristic postmodern buildings, such as the Bourbon in Paris or the Eaton Centre in Toronto, the Bonaventure aspires to be a total space, a complete world, a kind of miniature city to this new total space. Meanwhile, corresponds to new collective practice, a new mode in which individuals move and congregate, something like the practice of a new and historically original hypercrowd. And Edward Sawyer comments, it's a landscape that is highly fragmented. It's a space that decenters you, makes you feel lost. And in this feeling of being lost and dislocated, you feel that your only recourse is to submit to authority. You're helpless, you're made helpless, you're peripheralized, you're lost in the space. So let's summarize what students have learned so far. The perspectives of Baudrillard, Debord, and Jemison from the basis of asking questions of contemporary hotel design by drawing attention to the disconnect between these spaces and the everyday practices and meanings of people. They show how they deal instead in systems of images and signs that have a life of their own. They are alienated from the world from which they came and come to constitute the real, often bringing in new forms of inequality. Understanding that the theories provided students with three critical insights which guided them through the design process of their pixel hotels. And the first insight, spectacles are designed to obscure social and political inequalities and contradictions, journeying beneath spectacular reality claims, including the material conditions of global political economy. And the second critical insight, Baudrillard's extensions of the spectacle as simulacrum, exchanges us to rethink the idea of a stable organizational reality altogether, highlighting the myriad ways in which the spectacle simulacrum becomes constitutive of precarious social order at a given moment. And the third one, spectacles constitute actors, spaces, and relationships in which that may not always be intended or controllable. This propels organizations into new territories and conversations, for instance, because representations not just hide material inequalities, but are themselves productive of new ones. Thank you.